Welcome to the USC channel and USC Primetime Live here at the Voice of College Football, presented by FanDuel. I'm Matt Zemek along with Ethan Inman and Crashlet Collier. We know we have a lot of news to get to, so we'll be sure to get to all the items. Defensive coordinator talk at USC just around the corner. But first, we didn't do our normal show last week, as you guys know. If you were there for the live show, man, that was a wild thing. And of course, it was a gut punch in terms of the game, but like Crash was putting up with TCU hecklers outside the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. That was quite a scene if you were there to catch it. And, we had Oklahoma trolls in the chat. We had, TCU folks in the chat. And we had Notre Dame fans in the chat. Like, just elbowing all of us in the chops. But we're big boys, we're adults. Like this is college sports, right? Rivalries, passions, grudge matches. We're here for it. And when USC steps on a rake the way it did, like, hey, we just have to stand here and face the music. So we know we have a lot of big issues, but because we didn't do our normal show at the normal time and we were reacting live in real time to that Alamo Bowl, Ethan, then Crash, just anything you want to add or perhaps subtract from the Alamo Bowl 1 week later?
Yeah, I think the thing that's still kind of on my mind from the Alamo Bowl is probably Alex Graham's performance, just because he remains unsigned. USC has not announced that they're retaining him yet. I think that, we heard a lot about Alex Graham all season. We heard that, he was going to be this difference maker, that he was going to be this star, but he, didn't really get a chance to show it too much just due to injuries. And so for him to go out and play like that, it kind of reminded me of how Kamari Ramsey played last year. And I believe I saw someone on Twitter who said something similar. So I was really impressed with him, and it only further kind of, I think if I hadn't have seen that performance out of him, I would care a little bit less about his return. I would still care, but, I think it would just kind of be based on hearsay and based on what people had said about him. But now that I've seen that on the field, I'm really hoping that USC re-signs him. So that's kind of the main thing on my mind, but nothing too crazy beyond that.
I think for me, just like, obviously, I think it was still such a gut punch, especially just USC had that lead. And just even though Jade Mayava didn't have his best game, I think it just shows, as we'll get more depth later in the show, I think as we talked about, it's just really clear that Eric Henderson cannot be the next leading the defense, be the defensive coordinator. If whoever USC brings in wants to retain him and keep his current titles as co-DC, I'm not opposed to that, but he cannot be calling a defense for USC next year. I think that's my big thing that I'm taking away, especially as, it was such a gut punch. And as Matt pointed out, I'm, still reeling from, getting heckled by all those TCU fans last week when I was reporting live.
It was last year. It was last year.
Well, I meant last
December
week.
December 30th.
Yes. Well, 2026, new year, but still, yeah. It was actually my first time really doing live reporting like that. So that was actually
100% correct. You were 100% correct.
Even though that was my first time really doing live reporting in that sort of capacity, outside the stadium, it was still really fun. I had a good time.
Handled it like a pro, baby. Handled it like a champ.
Yeah. So those are pretty much my thoughts on the game.
Yeah, I would echo that, Crash. Like that, yeah, Eric Henderson can't be defensive coordinator. And you know what? I'm going to share a humiliating experience that I had last week. I hosted one of the shows at the Voice of College Football, the national show. And someone asked me about the defensive coordinator search, which is going to be our next topic. And they said, Sean Nua might go to BYU. And I went, Sean Nua, who's that? Like I had completely forgotten about him, but here's the thing. So total own goal, brutal mistake on my part. But here's the other thing. Have either of you guys read a single word written about Sean Nua the whole season? I follow the beat guys. I follow Ryan Cartier. I follow Shotgun Spratling. I follow Connor Morissette. I can't recall a single mention in 4 months, September through December, of Sean Nua. So where did he go? That's why I was thrown off when someone talked to me about Sean Newell, and I went, where is he? So of course I should know that. I'm not making excuses, but it did come from a place of, wow, we went through a whole season not reading about him, and the three of us, we didn't mention him at all. Like that's just pretty jarring, but it flows into, I just wanted to mention that. It flows into a mention of the defensive coordinator search. And so really interesting stories. So Stanford targeting Pete Kwiatkowski, that's one piece of the puzzle here. But then another big story, I don't know if you've caught this, folks. This Pete Thamel reported it not too long before we came on air, maybe like an hour before we came on the air. Washington quarterback Damon Williams, who had signed an NIL deal. It seemed a done deal that he was staying with Jedd Fisch. And of course, Washington has a top 15 recruiting class, lots of momentum there. He's now in the portal. He said, do not contact me. That is an earthquake in Seattle. And so how does this relate to USC's defensive coordinator search? We talked about Ryan Walters, Jedd Fisch's defensive coordinator, as the plan B if Pete Kwiatkowski says no or perhaps goes to Stanford. So, Ethan, then Crash. Lots of interesting and very juicy plot points with the USC defensive coordinator search. What are you hearing? Where do you think this is going? How do you see these moving parts sorting themselves out?
So I want to talk about Ryan Walters first, just because I saw a really interesting tweet right before we came on air that says that Washington sources say that they are prepared to pursue all legal avenues to enforce his signed contract. So this is not over, and it sounds like
Damon Williams contract.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So it sounds like they're gonna try and force him to play there, even though he doesn't want to. So if that's what ends up happening, oh boy, that buckle up, because I'm sure that'll be fireworks left and right. But in terms of the DC search, I mean, to me, the new hot name in the search that that USC has is obviously Pete Carroll. I mean, come on, guys, like, let's not overthink this so much. If he's 5 decades of football experience, he's won a national title, he's won two national titles and a Super Bowl. Like, those kind of guys don't just grow on trees. And yeah, do I think it's a long shot? Absolutely. I'm not delusional. I don't think that. I think it's a long shot that Pete wants to come back, and I think it's a long shot that Lincoln Riley would be humble enough to hire him. But the timing is working out. I mean, people kind of floated the idea, like, in just and kind of went, haha, this this would be fun when he kind of separated from Seattle. But this time the timing seems to be a little bit more opportunistic for both of them. I think there's not a lot of guys for USC to consider, and I think that Pete Carroll needs kind of a soft rebound. I don't think he should go right back immediately into coaching another NFL team as a head coach. But I think he doesn't want to go out this way either in terms of retirement. So I don't know. I wrote about it at Trojans Wire. It got a lot of people fired up. I'm sure, like I said, I am not at all tricked by the reality of the situation. I know that it's a long shot, but it's one we can talk about until it's not a reality. So that's the guy that I've been thinking about in terms of the DC.
Man, I think a few names that come to mind. I think Ryan Walters is certainly one that could be considered, although I'm not sure, just because, Damon Williams is the quarterback. I'm not I mean, I get, like, you definitely talk about it. Does it destabilize the UW program a little bit? I'm not sure exactly DC to QB is a perfect link. I mean, just because of just how that kind of works. So I'm not disagreeing with your logic, but it's a little trickier to see, at least from that perspective. That said, I think Walters would be a really smart candidate at USC. I also think Mark Stoops, as we talked about before, a little bit of bad blood with how Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma, so that could be a little tricky there. But one that I'm kind of been wondering if USC could land would be Tom Allen, especially with – I think that's one I'm coming on. I think it might be a long shot for him to leave Clemson. He said he's happy being there. I know it's like he left Penn State to go to Clemson to be close to his family, which I do get and respect. But I feel like it's one after just the frustrating year Clemson had that would Allen be looking for another move? And I mean, especially with the work he did at Penn State, which USC and Lincoln Riley witnessed firsthand. I mean, well, that was more offense, but still just how just that year in general was really impressive from Allen and what he was able to do with top talent. So I think that would be one that I'd really be leaning towards seeing USC go for, would be Tom Allen.
All right. Well, boy, so many interesting things to talk about here. So I'm going to get to Pete Carroll in a bit, Ethan, because you mentioned him. But first, let's mention Clemson, because at Clemson, there's a guy who just got fired. His name's Garrett Riley. And we've talked about Dennis Simmons not hitting it. You know, USC's has the top tier receivers like Mekhi, Jacoby, yes, but depth, third option, fourth option. You know, Dennis Simmons has not been doing that. You know, Dorian Singer was a bust, didn't really get, he's not getting those depth guys coached up so that USC has elite third, fourth, fifth options. What if Garrett Riley comes aboard as wide receiver coach? Crash, then Ethan.
I think that's a move that could make sense. I think it makes sense in a lot of ways. I mean, and it's not an uncommon practice in sports, as I've learned, for coaches to hire family members. I mean, obviously that certainly can lead to potentially conflicts of interest, but I think that could be a good hire. I mean, especially to get someone fresh in there, someone new, get some fresh ideas, figure out how to develop talent, get guys who want to come and don't want to leave because they're concerned about their lack of playing time. And that's, I think, the one thing that does concern me about Simmons. We saw last year both Zachariah Branch, who's now going to be off to the NFL, go to Georgia and have a great year, and then Deuce Robinson go to FSU and be one of the top receivers in the ACC. So I think really it's you got to get someone who's got to get receivers to buy in and say, all right, yeah, you know what? I think it's not going to be maybe you're not going to play this much this year, but if you stay patient, like you will get your turn. And I think that's something that I think by getting a fresh receivers coach in there potentially could happen. So I'm not opposed to it at all, actually.
I kind of actually agree with Bob's comment, and I'm really glad you brought it up, Matt, because I mean, I wrote about this a week ago. I kind of explored all the potential avenues of it. I just don't really trust Lincoln Riley hiring someone he knows. I don't think that he has a good track record of that at USC. I mean, Alex Grinch, Benny Wiley, just kind of, you know, the whole 9 yards. Nobody that he's brought over or that he's been super familiar with has really worked out. So I don't. It's not, you know, that I think that Dennis Simmons has been an absolute rock star. I just don't think he's been bad enough to warrant such a risky potential hire. I think, you know, if there was like an absolute rock star wide receivers coach out there that was not a Lincoln Riley homer, then, you know, I'd be more open to the idea. But I just kind of have a general sense of distrust for anyone that Lincoln knows and is like within his inner circle, because it just hasn't worked out well the last couple of times it's happened.
I would just provide the devil's advocate, or not even devil's advocate, just the contrary line of thought. And that is Garrett Riley was offensive coordinator, wide receivers coach. That's a demotion for him. So like it's a little bit more specific, something he could handle. And the other thing about Garrett Riley, you know, Clemson under Dabo has been a sinking ship. And so Garrett Riley certainly bears a lot of the responsibility for that, but it's also Dabo not adjusting to the portal. And the thing to remember about Garrett Riley, especially after Texas Tech lost to Oregon in the Orange Bowl, TCU in 2022, it remains the only Big 12 team to win a playoff game. That was with Garrett Riley helping TCU score 51 against Michigan and Jim Harbaugh in that Fiesta Bowl. So, like, you know, sometimes one job doesn't go the right way and you just need to hit the reset button. It could be what Garrett Riley needs. But obviously, as Ethan mentions, is that the thing USC needs? All right. So speaking of USC, let's go back to the Pete Carroll conversation. So let's just talk about Pete Carroll's future. And we have the news, you know, just before we came on the air, John Harbaugh fired by the Baltimore Ravens. So you have John Harbaugh, Kevin Stefanski, and Brian Flores. All, you know, those are the top three coaches in the NFL coaching carousel. And you know, the Ravens' job is obviously number one. So you got to think Flores or Stefanski to Baltimore to go to the Ravens. But then it might get a little more complicated. You know, the Giants have an open job, the Titans have an open job, the Cardinals have an open job. To me, guys, and I'll let you weigh in, I think the right landing spot for Pete Carroll, the Atlanta Falcons, because you're in the NFC South You play the Saints twice a year. You play the Panthers twice a year. And if the Bucs don't fire Todd Bowles, like Pete Carroll instantly becomes the best coach in the division. Now, obviously we got to see what the Bucs do with Todd Bowles. They're kind of biding their time. It's kind of an eerie quiet in Tampa Bay. Like you can just feel the gears turning there. But if Tampa Bay retains Todd Bowles, Pete Carroll is clearly the best coach in the NFC South. Like he's not going to win 12 games a year, but he's going to win 9 or 10, and he's probably going to make the playoffs. And like there are resources in Atlanta. There are dudes in Atlanta. They had a good pass rush. They have Kyle Pitts. They have Drake London. They have Bijan Robinson. And apparently they're releasing Kirk Cousins. So like they can get a veteran QB to replace Kirk Cousins. So to me, guys, Atlanta would make really good sense for Pete Carroll. I know Ethan's talked a little bit about, Pete Carroll's mindset. You don't want to go out. You don't want to finish your career going 3-14 for the Raiders. So Ethan, I'll circle back to you for some more insights on Pete Carroll's menu of options, but let's first turn it over to Crash. Crash, what do you think would be best for Pete Carroll? Obviously, USC fans would love to have him, but as Ethan said, that's not likely, right? He's probably going to want another NFL coaching job. He probably doesn't want the demotion to a coordinator. So of what's out there, particularly in the NFL, what do you think would be best for Pete Carroll?
Matt, I think with Pete Carroll, I think especially one thing you got to consider is his age. And I think that is one thing. And it's not like, oh, you know what? It was like he even had like a mid-year. He had a terrible year. So it's like between his age and just how just the absolute flame out that the Raiders were this year, I think it's kind of hard to see him being an attractive candidate for at least as a head coach in the NFL or a head coach anywhere for that matter, just really anywhere. I mean, I get your logic about Atlanta, but are they going to want to take a swing on a guy who might not have that many years left coaching? And I mean, is Pete Carroll in some ways going to be kind of the candidate that he was? Like, is someone going to have to settle for him? Is kind of how I'd see it if in the NFL. Like, kind of like not too similar how USC kind of was like had to settle for him after they kind of swung and missed on Mike Bellotti, Mike Riley, and a couple other of their top candidates in 2001. So for those reasons, it's hard to see him just getting a job unless it's kind of just someone just keeps swinging and missing or find like, all right, fine, we gotta take Pete. As for the USC thing, I could see that making sense, but just my question there is how much recruiting responsibility is going to be on him and how out of practice is he with it? Because my one concern with him going back to USC, not that I would not love to see Pete Carroll back on the sidelines of the Coliseum. Do not get me wrong about that. Is he going to be another Rob Ryan who's just completely out of practice because they've been out of college for so long? I mean, granted, Ryan's been out significantly longer, but still, just will Carroll be able to, adjust to this new era? Because it's a lot different than when he left USC in 2009.
So, Ethan, added insights, particularly with regard to the NFL coaching carousel piece of this for Pete Carroll.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with another comment from Bob. Bob's been on fire tonight. I like him better as a defensive coordinator, better than a head coach anywhere, and including the NFL. I think, it's kind of like what Crash said. He's really old, and he's not getting any younger, and so you kind of, if you're hiring Pete Carroll, you kind of need to be in a position where you feel like you can win immediately. And the Raiders, being as delusional as they are, just kind of a delusional franchise pretty consistently throughout their history, thought that they could, in one offseason, build a roster that could compete for the Super Bowl. And then, of course, it failed. Like, looking back, it was ridiculous. It really was. It's just, typical Raiders delusion, basically. But so there's just not too many head coaching positions where that feels like a good investment to me. I think, there's going to potentially be some defensive coordinator positions opening up that he would be an interesting fit for. This is, again, more narrative driven, and I don't know how much it makes actual sense, but I'm sure Robert Saleh is going to get another coaching opportunity. another coaching opportunity. It'd be really interesting to consider the potential that he goes to the 49ers after all those years with the Seahawks. I don't think he will.
He's a former 49er defensive coordinator, as you know.
Yep. And man, just after all those rivalry years, it would sure be interesting to see him on the other side of it, just kind of like it was for Richard Sherman at the end of his career. And that's obviously a roster that's more built to win immediately than a roster even like the Falcons. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, I even think that I would prefer him going to college over the NFL. I think he still has the energy. I mean, he taught a class at USC just last year. I think that, you know, he's always kind of brought that sort of youthful energy with him wherever he's gone. I don't really worry about that translating. And he was always just such like a beloved figure in the USC community that he's just a people person in general. Like I don't really worry about him adjusting to this era of recruiting. But yeah, I think to me, what makes the most sense is finding a nice defensive coordinator job at a program either in the NFL or college where the roster suggests that he could win pretty immediately, because I don't think it's fair to any of these other teams to kind of have to wait a couple of years for him to succeed. And I don't think it's fair to him because I think he's only got a couple of years left. USC, I think, is a uniquely interesting fit because Lincoln Riley needs to win immediately. If he does not win in 2026, it's likely that we're talking next offseason about who our new head coach is. So I think because of that, there's like a uniquely shared vision of like, hey, we don't have, all the time in the world to keep rebuilding this thing. We need to win in 2026. And so if he can find another spot like that, either in the NFL or in college, I think that's best suited for him.
I'll just say this. I don't want this to be Pete Carroll's last season of coaching football. There has to be something after this. And so I hope that Pete does have one more act in him. Let's remind ourselves he signed a 3-year deal with the Raiders. And of course it all imploded, but he certainly planned on coaching in 2026 and 2027. So I think, to use the meme, I got one more in me, the Vince Carter meme. I do think that. I would say if you're the Falcons, you probably go Kevin Stefanski first. I think Brian Flores might be going to Baltimore. But if you're the Falcons, Stefanski first. But if Stefanski goes to the New York Giants, then Pete Carroll is right there. And I think it makes all the sense in the world. Go to the NFC South, division champion, 8-9. Like that is Pete's landing spot if the Falcons do not pounce on Stefanski or Flores. All right, so lots of interesting tangents there, from the USC defensive coordinator conversation, a Pete Carroll conversation, a Garrett Riley conversation. We will see what happens. Ryan Walters, Pete Kwiatkowski, all these ping pong balls are in the hopper. We'll see if USC is able to land the plane and get a deal done this week. And, with the NFL playoffs going on, maybe USC's waiting for an NFL team season to end. Maybe there's an unknown angle that the Trojans are considering right now. All right, so USC Primetime Live at the Voice of College Football. Again, it's now presented by FanDuel. And so we have this thing called the College Football Playoff Semifinals, Thursday and Friday. Might have heard of them. And so let's take a look at the odds presented by FanDuel. So Miami and Indiana are both favored by 3.5. Indiana a little bit more on the money line. Totals pretty close. A few more points expected in the Fiesta Bowl. That's Miami Ole Miss. Then the Peach Bowl. That's Oregon, Indiana on Friday. Guys, I'll just give my opinions up front. I am surprised that Miami is not a significantly bigger favorite than it currently is. And the main reason is that, Ole Miss's coaches, they're like, many of them have signed up with LSU and they've been caught in between. You're like, do I go join Lane Kiffin now or do I stay on for the semifinals? Like, that has been an open question all week. As we look at that game, Miami, again, favored by only 3.5. And you'll notice the minus 3.5 That's on the short end. The plus 3 and Ole Miss plus 3.5 is juiced minus 120. It's a higher price there. So guys, what is this? Like, to me, Miami looks like clearly the better team than Ole Miss, and you have Ole Miss in this very difficult in-between situation. Let's also add the point that Miami played December 31st. Ole Miss played one night later. Miami has an extra day of rest and preparation. Am I missing something? Miami minus 3.5 looks like the obvious play. Tell me I'm wrong. Ethan, Crash.
I think it's that just that Ole Miss magic, to be honest with you. I think, they're even though they're the higher seed, they're kind of the Cinderella team in this situation, given that Lane Kiffin left them behind. I think that they have a chip on their shoulder. I think that, whoever's making the odds definitely watched them go down and beat Georgia. And beating a Kirby Smart-led Georgia team in the playoff, that's no small feat. So I think it's kind of the uncertainty there. I think that, the odds makers obviously are trying not to lose big here on a bunch of people betting on Ole Miss. So I think that's how I see it. Is just, I think that there's, a certain amount of motivation that I think that Ole Miss is going into this game with, to where, and just based on how they performed against Georgia, there's reasons to believe in them, I think. So that's why I would assume that the points are so close, and it's not a bigger favor for the Hurricanes there.
Matt, I'm wondering in this one, are just odds makers just listening to every word that Pete Golding has said? Because, I mean, let's be honest. The guy's been pretty damn transparent from the day he got that job. He's like, I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. Like, what's the only thing he's kind of done that's kind of was expected? He got a haircut. Other than that, he's like, I'm not gonna be Lane Kiffin. I'm not going to hot yoga. I'm not doing all this stuff that Lane did. I'm gonna be Pete Golding. Like, he's been pretty transparent and honest, and it's kind of refreshing and fun. Like, it kind of makes you want to root for Ole Miss a little bit. But I think just how he's transparent, he's been, it's like, yeah, you know what? It's not my call. Like, they're not employed by me. I mean, they're welcome to be here if they want, but if they can't, well, we'll figure it out. Like, he trusts the people that he has in his building that are still going to be on staff next year and for the remainder who don't have to do double duty between Ole Miss and LSU right now. So I think just because of how transparent and open he's been, and just the confidence that he's projecting in all his press conferences, I have to think that's being a factor. And frankly, I'm kind of bought in on it. I can't lie. Like, I'm kind of thinking that Ole Miss might pull off the upset. Like, when I saw the line spreads and all that, I don't check that stuff too much, but I was always a little surprised to just see Ole Miss as the underdog, just considering how they've been playing. And especially, maybe there's a rest factor, but like Ethan said, beating a Kirby Smart Georgia CFP team is no small feat. So I'm kind of thinking that I'm smelling an upset over here going down this weekend, this week, Matt.
All right, well, Ole Miss with that fat plus money price at FanDuel, that's nice and juicy out there. So that's certainly something to consider. I will just say that Ruben Bain not being invited to the Heisman ceremony as a finalist, while Julian Sayin did get invited. Can we see how much of a joke that is right now? Quarterbacks got way too much love in college football this year, and it was guys like Ruben Bain, Jacob Rodriguez. They should have been there. The quarterbacks should not have been. So that is part of the Miami story and the Miami side of what will be the Fiesta Bowl. That's in Glendale on Thursday. So let's go back to the FanDuel odds. Again, both of the favorites are favored by the same spread, 3.5. But whereas with Miami, if you want Miami minus 3.5 at FanDuel, it's minus 102. At Indiana, you get it juiced a little bit, minus 115. But it's just 3.5. The line was 4.5 earlier in the week. So, and if you want to stick Indiana in like a Indiana money line in a parlay, minus 184. So pretty decent price there. And I would ask the same question: why isn't Indiana a bigger favorite? They beat Oregon by 10 on the road, and yet just 3.5. So maybe there's a feeling that just the revenge angle and, beating a team twice is hard. Rematches swing to the team that lost the first time. Crash, let's start us off and then go to Ethan in terms of what you think about this line, and are you surprised that it's just 3.5 a couple days before kickoff in Atlanta?
Matt, well, I think there's certainly a revenge factor, and then obviously the things you said, you can't beat a team twice. And even if you want to throw in, Oregon might be in a bit more rhythm. They've played an extra game. I'm going to argue that once you get to the semifinals, it doesn't mean anything. Everyone's got roughly the same amount of rest. But I think, honestly, I'm surprised that the spread isn't more because of just how Indiana took care of business in Autzen Stadium. This wasn't like, this was in Bloomington. This was in Autzen Stadium. And I'll tell you guys, Autzen Stadium 2 years ago when I went in 2023 was the most hostile environment I have ever been in my life. And the Hoosiers go in there, take care of business, and not to mention, the score doesn't tell the whole story. Like, Indiana was dominating the Ducks. Like, it's only was by 10 because Fernando Mendoza threw a pick 6 at the end, or whenever it was. But pretty much my point is, the Hoosiers went into Autzen and took care of business, and now suddenly everyone's thinking, it's at a neutral site. Won't that make it easier for Indiana then, is I guess my thinking. I mean, obviously, I'm kind of pulling for Oregon just because my aunt who went there. Sorry to all the SC fans. Go ahead, hate on me. Bring it on. But I think I'm still surprised that it's not more because of just how the Hoosiers just dominated that game. And not to mention, dominated almost every other game they've played this season. I mean, just look at the Rose Bowl. I was there. Alabama was not in it. Had no business being in that game.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of Crash's points there. I think that it being at a neutral site, to me, screams, Indiana winning even easier. And also all the news that's come out about Oregon's running backs. Like, Oregon's running game is very severely decimated. Jordan Davison's not playing in the game. They have a couple transfers that have already hit the portal. So I think they have like 2 healthy running backs. It's not great. And we kind of know how, key their running game was to beating USC. But I think it's probably mostly it's so hard to beat a team twice in college football attitude. I would assume that that's basically it. But yeah, I'm also surprised that it's not a bigger, the points are not more in Indiana's favor, because everything else about this game screams, Indiana walking away with it even easier than last time. So,
yeah. Here's the amazing stat about Indiana specifically in the quarterfinals generally, because we've now had 8 quarterfinals in these first 2 years of the 12-team playoff. The teams with a first round bye are 1-7 in the quarterfinals. But who's the one? Indiana. Curt Cignetti is just setting the bar so high. I mean, like, it blows the mind just how ridiculous he is in terms of just overshooting every expectation, every standard, every logical marker. Like, he's just going so far beyond all his peers in the profession. Now, Mario Cristobal's been lights out in this playoff. Like, he's getting Carson Beck to play turnover-free football. Cristobal is nailing it, and I've criticized him a ton in the past, but Cristobal is crushing it. And yet Cignetti, he's just setting the bar so much higher than him. So in the end, Miami is the most talented team. Like, Miami is the NFL Combine team, the team with dudes, the team with the most guys who are going to be playing on Sundays. But Indiana is the best coach team. So to me, it feels like a definite collision course, Miami versus Indiana on January 19th. All right, so we wanted to talk about those playoff semis. Now let's come back to USC. And so the other really, really big story, Husan Longstreet's brother, Kevin, transfers. And so that has the rumor mill, the speculation flying at warp speed. And Ethan, you wrote about this. What the choice facing Husan Longstreet. Let's just walk everybody through what you wrote at Trojans Wire and just kind of, chop this up, because this is a really, obviously it's an emotionally fraught decision. It's a complicated decision. Do I stay and wait my turn and then I get the keys to Lincoln Riley's offense in 2027, or I need the playing time. I need the reps now. I need to go somewhere else. My brother's out of here. Walk us through what you think is going on with Husan Longstreet's choice.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the factors that you mentioned are definitely in play. I mean, it's always special to get to play with, your brother, with your family members. I mean, we know that better than anybody at USC with, kind of who we've seen in recent years. Obviously, the Branch brothers coming through. All three of the Miller brothers now are going to be with us next year. King Miller, Kalon Miller, and Kane Miller. And then, Carrington Pierce obviously joining his brother Christian at USC as well. But I think that the thing that I'm really hoping for Husan Longstreet is that he makes this decision, truly based on what he believes is best for himself, and not based on what other people are expecting of him, based on impressing other people, whatever that may be. I just really hope that he, kind of, and that may mean parting ways with his brother. Like it's cool to get to play with your siblings, like I said, and I know better than anybody, what being around family means. And I think that's always very, very important and a very cool opportunity to take when you have it. But there's just sometimes when it doesn't make sense for you and your brother to go to the same university. Like it's possible that Kevin Longstreet it wasn't working out for him at USC, but it's, if Husan Longstreet thinks that it will, I think that he should take that opportunity, and, it shouldn't just be based on, well, my brother's going somewhere else, so I have to go somewhere else. Because obviously it doesn't say anything about their relationship for Husan Longstreet to stay at USC. They can still be brothers, they can still be best friends, and play college football at two different schools. And then I think that, there's a real school of thought in today's day and age that you need to just start and play immediately, because you'll maximize your NIL earnings that way. You'll get your name out there that way. It's just ease of access, like, because you can transfer so easily now, and there's so many quarterback needy schools out there. Like the temptation is always there. I think, to me, there's a lot of benefits for Husan Longstreet staying. I think that he, obviously gets to be coached by Lincoln Riley for another year, who's a QB guru, and the entire USC offensive coaching staff as well. I think that he, gets put in a situation where I don't think it's entirely impossible for him to see the field next year. I think, it's Maava coming back certainly, I think, makes him the week one starter. I don't think that there's really any situation where, barring Maava getting hurt in the offseason or having some just disastrous offseason while Husan Longstreet has an amazing, amazing one. I think, Maava's earned the right to be under center week one, but that doesn't mean that he'll be under center by the end of the year. Again, potentially due to injuries, also just due to the fact that Lincoln Riley needs to win next year. So if Maava's struggling, I think he has a much shorter leash next year than he did this year, even despite all the stuff that he proved on the field. And I think that you've seen that in the past with Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams, right? Like Spencer Rattler came into that year in 2021, the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman, and Caleb Williams was starting by the Red River rivalry in like week 6 or something like that because Spencer Rattler wasn't cutting it. So if he really believes in himself, and I think also, just based on, I think he uses his red shirt for last year. I think that, that gives him 4 years of eligibility left. And I think that, even if he's a backup next year, I think you could see him getting used a little bit like Arch Manning was in his second year at Texas, in a couple of special packages like that, because there's no reason to preserve his red shirt anymore. So if Lincoln Riley's smart, he'll use him in situations where a running quarterback is needed and stuff like that. So, he can contribute to winning next year. It's good for his development. And, if things go awry, like if USC goes 8-5 and Lincoln Riley's fired, and, it feels like a wasted year, he still has 3 years of eligibility left after that, to, follow coaches he likes here to another destination, to stick around with whoever comes, to, explore whatever opportunity he has. But I think it's just such a potentially special opportunity with the coaching staff that we have, and also just with the the recruiting classes that we have, because he's obviously going to be surrounded by a lot of talent if USC can win football games. To next year potentially be stepping into the 2026 recruiting class, having a full year under their belts. Hopefully another really strong 2027 recruiting class, and just a class of young talent that's ready to rock. So I think it makes a lot of sense for him to stay, and I think that though it's contrary to the common logic of this era of college football, I think it could potentially be beneficial to his career in the long run. I don't think that just jumping into the first opportunity you have to play really works out for any quarterback consistently in the NFL or in college. So to me, it seems smart to stay, and the consequences of staying are a lot less disastrous than the consequences of leaving potentially. We all saw what happened with Malachi Nelson the last couple of years. So to me, just stick around another year, and if it doesn't work out, you still have your whole college career ahead of you. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Ethan brought up a point that I was really looking to highlight about just the idea of staying patient. You brought up Arch Manning. And I like that because Arch Manning, obviously, came in very high profile. Everyone's, been expecting a lot from him from the get-go because his name is Manning. But what did Arch do? He sat for 2 years behind Quinn Ewers. And yeah, that first year, those first few games this year, he struggled. Everyone's like, oh, he's mid, we're not sure to live up to the hype. But then I'm not going to say he necessarily got there, but he improved a lot during this past season. So I think that could be something where Hassan Longstreet can then take another year, sit behind Jade Mayava, get better, continue to develop, and then that way especially because you were saying, because USC preserved his red shirt, he can actually be utilized a bit more and play a bit, especially in blowouts, and just there are a lot of more opportunities to really play him this year because you've preserved his red shirt. So I think that'll help to potentially motivate him to stay. And then he gets reps, he sees the field, even if he's not the full-time starter. And then come year 3, he can be fully ready to take the reins. And even regardless of what happens with the coaching staff, even if he has a slow start, he'll have that experience to lean on. So I think long-term for his development, it's going to be better if he stays. That said, though, if there's an opportunity out there and he thinks, I think I can be ready for it now, I would not blame him at all for taking it. But I think for his long-term development, I think it's like you said, Ethan, he's better. And I think the best example, he's just got to look to Texas and just see what Arch Manning did for 2 years.
I just want to jump back in real quick because I just wanted to jump on something you said, Crash, about him staying and taking the reins in year 3. I think the other potential benefit of this is there's absolutely no way in my mind that if Hassan Longstreet stays for a 3rd year that he's not starting. Lincoln Riley has honored quarterback loyalty. Miller Moss, in hindsight, did Miller Moss was Miller Moss starting in week 1 of the 2024 season really the best move for the USC program? Probably not. If we had put Mayava out there week 1 and let him get some more reps from the get-go, and then he just more games under his belt quicker, he probably would have been even better this year than he was last year. Could Lincoln Riley have seen that? What could he have seen Miller Moss's shortcomings? That's another topic for another time, I suppose. But I think that Lincoln Riley did honor Miller Moss's loyalty because Miller Moss was a Clay Helton recruit who stuck with Lincoln when he came to town, even though he knew Caleb Williams was coming. Jackson Dart obviously didn't, and then again sat another 2 years behind Caleb. And so I think that because of that, Lincoln Riley was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and willing to give him a shot. And he played really well in the Holiday Bowl too, and in the first couple of games as the USC quarterback. Let's not pretend he was some total scrub. But I do think that Hassan Longstreet can have a bit of reassurance that if he stays this year, that he will get his chance to be the starting quarterback at USC, because it would be an absolute, jaw to the floor shocker if anyone else started over him in 2027 if he stays for 2026, in my opinion.
Timing also does check out better because Mayava will have exhausted his eligibility after the season. It wasn't even with the back to the Arch Manning example, Quinn Ewers still had 1 more year of eligibility. He chose to forego to get drafted.
All right, Ethan, gotta pick apart something you said. It was probably better, or would have been better, if Jaden Mayava started Week 1 in 2024.
I think, like, for the long-term health of the program, I don't think we beat LSU if Mayava starts that game.
Yeah.
And so, maybe that season never really gets off the ground. Putting Mayava under center against that Michigan defense with how bad that USC offensive line played, also, it sounds pretty scary to me.
Yeah.
But again, like, those early experiences probably would have, set him up better. I think by the end of the year, he's probably playing better. And then he comes into, last offseason with a year of experience under his belt rather than 4 games, with 2 of them coming against like pretty bad teams. And then the other 2, one being the loss to Notre Dame and one being the loss to Texas A&M, where he played like really all over the place. I think, that would have helped his development even more. I think he's an even better quarterback this year, obviously. So hindsight's 2020, obviously, but and so and again, like I said, it's possible that 2024 would have been worse, but I do think that 2025 would have been better if we had started Mayava Week 1.
Yep. No, just wanted to flesh out that opinion. And I would say this, both last year with Moss and Mayava and this year with Mayava and Longstreet, Lincoln Riley played his cards wrong. You all know, I think, it was ridiculous to just have Longstreet play 1 or 2 plays in a couple games. Like that was just moronic. Let's just call it for what it is. Like if you're gonna play someone 4 games, but then not play him a 5th game, and you want to preserve the red shirt, play him. All right. If you're playing him 4 games, play him. So so here we are with Husan Longstreet considering a transfer out. What if instead of playing 1 or 2 snaps in, I believe it was 2 games, he got extensive reps in the first 2 cupcake games, but then there were Illinois. I think he was in for either just 1 or 2 plays. There's another game where he was just in for 1 or 2 plays. If he had played like a quarter in those 2 games instead of just 1 or 2 plays, are we in this position? Are we here having this conversation about Husan Longstreet potentially transferring? Can't guarantee it, but I think it certainly would have helped that Lincoln Riley, if you have 2 quarterbacks that are talented, you should, and you're bothering to give the backup some reps, right? Like you don't have to give the backup any reps if you don't want to, but if you are going to give the backup reps, give them reps, go all the way, or at least go a lot further than you did. And this relates to last year. And I think we're even the happy medium here. Miller Moss absolutely deserves to start, because not just because of the Holiday Bowl, but like he was familiar with the offense. He spent all the time within the program, and we saw how unprepared Jaden Mayava was late in the 2024 season. He needed a full off season of teaching, but Jaden Mayava had an electric skill set, which we saw this past season, and USC in 2024 could have been really special if Jaden Mayava was playing like a quarter here or a quarter there in the middle of the season. You get at Minnesota, at Maryland, you stick Jaden Mayava in there with his change of pace, his dynamism. That could have swung some of those close games that USC wound up losing. So, there is such I think, a fixed idea of, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. BS. It can certainly be like that. If your 2 quarterbacks are mediocre, you have no quarterbacks. But if you have 2 guys who are talented, and Miller Moss had good games that season. He had a really good Penn State game. He had a really good Rutgers game. He had a really good, the LSU game, of course, was really good as well. He had several good outings, but he was inconsistent. Louisville fans saw that this past season. He won at Miami. He beat a team which might be playing for the national title, and he did it on the road. But then against Cal, he stinks it up. So Miller Moss just has this maddening tendency to be up and down. But if Lincoln Riley had been willing to play 2 quarterbacks, okay, I'll play Miller Moss, start him off. If he struggles, I'm going to shove Mayava in there for a quarter, and maybe I'll even ride him a little more. That is where Lincoln Riley played his cards wrong. And it's a similar thing with Husan Longstreet, that if he had gotten more mileage out of Longstreet, giving him more reps. Again, it's not a guarantee, but maybe Husan Longstreet would say, hey, Lincoln Riley has my back. He gave me a fair shot. I got to play a whole quarter in the Illinois game. Maybe the mindset is different. Lincoln Riley definitely left something on the table. Definitely want to drill down on that. All right, so we have more to talk about here at the Voice of College Football, but we do want to give you a word from not from FanDuel, we've done that, but from our other sponsor. We'll see you on the other side.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
And we remind you that if you go to vocfb.com/shop, you can get one of those snappy VOCFB USC camo caps that Ethan's modeling. Any VOCFB product with the USC label on it goes to support the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. And also go to our YouTube page, USC at the Voice of College Football on YouTube. Click the join button. You join at the middle Heisman tier, the top national champion tier. You get exclusive insider access to the bonus cuts. And we have a 17-minute interview with former USC quarterback Cody Kessler. That's a bonus cut. We have a free 15-minute interview with him. We talked to him for a little over half an hour, but we have a 17-minute segment that is exclusive to our members at that middle Heisman tier or the top national champion tier. It's another way for you to support the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. All right, winding down the show, transfer portal. So some movement, some acquisitions, some pickups. Ethan, then Crash, let's make sure we look at the various transactions and acquisitions that USC has made. Your impressions. Ethan first.
I think it's really impressive that they're getting these high-profile defensive transfers despite not having a defensive coordinator. And I kind of wrote about that yesterday. Article came out today. Like, how are they doing it? I'm not sure how they are. I think that, the assistants are obviously putting in the work. And, there's just, I think Chad Bowden is just an absolute rock star. And I think, USC is paying up as well. And I don't think we should be ashamed to say that. It's just like the Dodgers are doing in baseball. Paying shows, being willing to pay to win shows competitiveness. So, not something to be ashamed of at all. But yeah, we talked a little bit last week, I think, about what positions USC should go after. And it seems like they're hitting on all of them. I mean, they've got 4 defensive guys, or I think it's 5 now. And I believe, 2 of them are linemen, and then you got 2 corners, and a linebacker. So, hey, they hit corner, they have an interior defensive lineman, they have an exterior defensive lineman, and they have a linebacker. So, and all veterans, all guys who've, kind of contributed at the D1 level. So, all guys with experience, which is kind of bridging the gap, I think, to me, between, all these young recruits and kind of the guys who are returners. Some guys kind of in the middle ground, some sophomores, juniors, I think is kind of what was needed there. So really excited about that. I think obviously, John Tez Williams is the big headliner because he's the number 1 corner in the portal. So, he's coming off injury. Prophet Brown's coming off injury. USC could have 2 comeback player of the year candidates there. We certainly hope that they do. And then, they get Terrell Anderson on the offensive side of the ball, who, he's not quite Cam Coleman, but he's a really, really good wide receiver projected to start for USC. So yeah, I think that they're hitting it out of the park so far. And with Chad Bowden, it always seems like there's more and more and more news to come. So yeah, no complaints here. I think that they're, all the position groups that I thought that they needed to address, they're addressing. I don't think that they're done addressing them. I certainly hope they aren't. But yeah, they're doing a good job so far.
I absolutely agree with Ethan. I think especially getting Jontes Williams, really as Carrington Pierce, Devin Bryant, all those guys they've been getting. I think it's just really, been impressive to see because of just how much, just like you said, they don't have a defensive coordinator, and not to mention, depending on who they hire, what's going to happen to the rest of the staff. Like, there's a good chance that between other schools targeting USC's defensive assistants and the lack of a current defensive coordinator, who, regardless of who they're going to want to bring in, is going to want to bring in their own people. You have to wonder it's really impressive that they're landing these guys. And I think Chad Bowden has helped. That has been one thing that has been consistent with USC. Even in the wake of just all the issues that have plagued Lincoln Riley throughout this, USC has not been afraid to throw money at their problems to try to make them go away. And to their credit, it seems like they're doing a good job of that. And I think, especially having Chad Bowden, and it's like we talked about a few weeks ago, like now that Chad Bowden has been here for a full year, is about to oversee this full recruiting, full transfer portal cycle, I think it really gives a lot of help for USC to really, get the guys they want, and not say that they weren't doing that last year, but to, really they got the full momentum. And it ties into like having Chad Bowden, and then I know this is exactly relevant to this discussion, but the other thing was having now Trumaine Carroll get his full year and to really implement his philosophies into building up USC's roster and getting guys stronger. So I think those two things are really just, helping even in the absence of a defensive coordinator and potentially a full defensive staff.
All right, let's take this one from Jeff Rodriguez. It seems they're holding off on the DC hire so the players can't leave. So interesting comment. My view is, like, don't you want to get your guy as defensive coordinator and sell that and market that? Like, the idea of, and let me just pull this up here from Joseph Barrett. Has there been any contact with Ryan Walters? None that I'm aware of. Putting out names, yes, we're putting out names, but like, I firmly think that if they can't land Kwiatkowski, who's my number one, that Ryan Walters is a really, really strong number two, someone I would be very happy with. Yes, he was a disaster as a head coach, but just talking about coordinators, right? A lot of failed head coaches make great, outstanding coordinators. And Ryan Walters, outstanding defensive coordinator at Illinois, outstanding defensive coordinator at Washington. So not only does he have a good, consistent track record as a defensive coordinator, but he's done it at two different Big Ten coaching stops, Illinois and Washington. So I just think he would be very, very strong as a plan B if they can't first get Kwiatkowski, who, again, is tied to Stanford. He's been linked to Stanford, and we'll see if Andrew Luck is able to sign him. But, I'm thinking that, it's not cataclysmic by any means if USC has to wait to get a coordinator. But when we consider USC needs to be getting premium defensive linemen, and Jontes Williams was a premium corner. USC's defensive line portal acquisitions have not been on that same level. So to me, you land the elite defensive coordinator, and then you get the elite defensive studs in the portal. That would be just me. But Ethan, Crash, what do you think about the idea of they're holding off on the DC hire so the players can't leave?
It's an interesting idea. I think, I heard a recruit say, and it was Jamion Winfield. He kind of came out and said that, he's ready to rock whatever defensive coordinator they hire. And I think that, we talked about earlier in the show when we were talking about Hassan Longstreet, like all the power that players have now. I think if any of the players had any sort of uncertainty about who the next coach would be, they'd just leave. Like, I don't, USC is not like going to win a recruit over in this era of college football by saying, like, just trust us, we'll hire the right guy. Like, I don't think that recruits are going to put up with that anymore. Like, it's your future they're talking about. It's their financial future you're talking about. And if they could go play better football and make better money elsewhere, can do so immediately in this kind of portal window, they're going to do it. So I don't think it's strategic in that way. I think the part about it being a guy in the playoffs or someone in the NFL could be true. My dream hire, apart from any of the guys, and this is not at all realistic because there's no way it happens, but kind of after watching how Miami's played in the playoffs, like getting Corey Heatherman would just be an absolute, grand slam home run. But and I think at this point, if USC tries something like that with any of the guys that are still left in the playoff, they're probably going to strike out because, if they can't even land Kwiatkowski, who's unemployed, and Kwiatkowski would rather go to Stanford, I think that says a lot about, high-level defensive coordinators' trust in a Lincoln Riley-led program at this point. So, I mean, NFL maybe could, just because, the NFL always just has some brutal endings to coaching tenures that happen around this time of the year where a coach just needs an easy rebound. And so taking kind of a demotion isn't always the end of the world for coaches like that. But I don't know. I think USC is, and this is certainly my hope, is that they're doing their due diligence. They're asking around. They're going after every guy that they can go after. And I think that the players are probably bought in because of some reason other than the defensive coordinator explicitly. Like, it's because they like the assistant that they're going to play for. It's because they, got paid or they liked their steak dinner at Mastro's or whatever. And I don't think that it's because they are just trusting in USC blindly. I really don't think so.
One name I did actually want to bring up that I've been reading, but I don't think we've talked too much about here on the podcast, has actually been Al Golden. And the reason I've been seeing his name pop up in the Times, and I think maybe the Athletic too, is because he worked at Notre Dame with Chad Bowden. So I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously the Bengals aren't in the NFL playoffs, but now that, the NFL regular season is over, was USC maybe waiting for him to become available? So just wanted to throw that name out there too, of just like, especially with Jeff mentioning that maybe the only reason they're waiting is they're waiting for all the NFL teams to get done to then fully consider their options. Because for all we know, and I'm not trying to, say, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but is USC really trying to see what's on the menu? Who is out there? Who can we get? Who's the best damn guy for the job? And how do we make sure we aren't settling? I wonder if that's just the mindset of USC and Lincoln Riley. So, but by waiting for the NFL season to be over, I think you can really then, now really see who's truly out there, especially with, all the coaching changes that have happened in the last 2 days with the NFL coaching carousel now taking off, which has already been chaotic, especially with, the names of two coaching legends being out of jobs already.
One note. So you talked about Al Golden, Crash. One note: Zach Taylor has been retained by the Bengals for 2026. So just in case anyone's wondering about that. So like, they're not shaking up the coaching staff. That's not how owner Mike Brown does business in Cincinnati. But like, if the Bengals crash and burn next year, Zach Taylor might be on his way out. And so that could be the Al Golden decision. So Ethan, I think that might be a listicle think piece for Trojans Wire, the Al Golden, Chad Bowden relationship. Crash, digging up some interesting material there. I wanted to address this Jeff Rodriguez comment. Talk seems cheap there, talking about Stanford. Other than hiring Luck, how much do the alums care about football? Doesn't seem like much. Jeff Rodriguez, generally you're right. But Jeff, one very well-heeled Stanford alum, like it takes just one, right? Donated $50 million to the football program. So Andrew Luck has a nice fat budget to spend. And so like that would be, if Kwiatkowski's going to Stanford, Andrew Luck is backing up the Brinks truck, and he's going to give Kwiatkowski a whole lot of money. And of course, it's interesting. Andrew Luck went cheap with his head coach hire, Tavita Pritchard. Like, that's a bargain basement hire. So I guess he might be thinking, all right, I went cheap with head coach. I need to go really high end and maybe give Kwiatkowski like what, $8-9 million as a coordinator. Maybe that could be in the works. But anyway, Jeff, so there was a $50 million gift from one Stanford donor to the football program. I mean, hey, if you want to donate $50 million to Stanford football, that's your choice. It's a choice we'd all like to be able to make, right? So that is why Kwiatkowski is in the mix for Stanford. They are in a position to pay him a whole lot of moolah. All right. Any final thoughts? Like anything else that you don't want to leave on the cutting room floor? Any other thoughts about portal, the program, the players, Lincoln Riley? Anything? Any final thoughts, guys? Ethan, Crash.
I'm really excited that we got Jade Abasiri back. I think that was a big re-signing. Obviously, yeah, just waiting on to see what happens with Alex Graham and Hassan Longstreet in the next couple days, hopefully. But Jade Abasiri was a big one. I think that, USC seems to, and USC is losing a lot of players in terms of quantity, but they're getting some pretty high quality players in the portal. So they seem to be it seems to be shaping up that USC will be kind of coming out on top there. One really weird portal entry to me was James Johnson, because he's a corner that they just played at running back in the bowl game. Like, why? What was that all about? Like, why did he just was he just like, oh, I want to try running back real quick before I leave and go to, I don't know, they're playing him in the backfield with King Miller. It's just weird to see him, he was a corner all season and didn't really play. And then he moved to running back for the bowl game. And then now he's in the portal as a cornerback again. Like, I don't know. I guess it's just wishy-washy college football players these days. But yeah, that's a real weird portal entry to me. Is like, oh, just like a week ago, he was playing running back for us in the bowl game, and now he's in the transfer portal as a corner again. Weird, but wishing nothing but the best for him. But yeah, truly interesting to see how players' careers can just change in an instant these days.
I think for me, I'm really hoping to just see USC finalize their defensive coordinator hire this year, so that way we can start building a staff, and then really just kind of figure out, like, all right, how do we just get the best guys? And I think one thing you said that I was going to kind of tag off on what you were saying about Stanford hiring Tavita Pritchard on the cheap, but then throwing everything to try to get Pete Kwiatkowski is. Not to say it's not important to spend big on your head coach, but is it more important on how big your assistant coaching staff pool is, and then the resources you supply to your program? So you're better off maybe getting a head coach, maybe a little bit on the cheaper side, but then having more resources available to the rest of the program. So I'm wondering, what will USC do in that regard with their program? Obviously, Lincoln Riley's, massive exception, given he's making 10, 11 million a year. But I am really interested to see kind of what do they spend on like their roster and this defensive coaching staff. So I'm wondering, will USC really have to up their offer if Kwiatkowski is the desired target? And also, even though I mentioned Al Golden and he's likely staying in Cincinnati, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'm curious what other NFL coordinators, defensive coordinators, could emerge as candidates for that job.
It's going to be really interesting. And so transfer portal season continues. And of course, next week, we will know which teams are playing in the national title game. One of them is going to be a Big Ten team. Big Ten guaranteed to have one team in the national title game for the third straight season. Michigan 2 seasons ago, Ohio State last season, and it's either Oregon or Indiana. I know whom USC fans are going to be rooting for in that Peach Bowl in Atlanta on Friday night. So, thank you for joining us at our normal time. We'll be back at the normal time next Tuesday, 10 p.m. in the East, 7 p.m. in the West. USC Primetime Live here at the Voice of College Football, presented by FanDuel. For Ethan Inman and Crashlet Collier, this is Matt Zemek. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next Tuesday. Fight on, everybody.